Hello, and thank you for joining us today for our Observability Trends webinar series. I'm Grant Swanson, and today we have Rakesh Gupta, Director of Product Management at Observe, who'll be showcasing our new Service Explorer feature and how it can create faster troubleshooting scenarios. Welcome, Rakesh.
Thanks, Grant. Great to be here. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen. Cool. So I'm Rakesh. I'm leading our product management efforts for APM and distributed tracing here at Observe. And I'm really excited to talk about our Service Explorer, which we made generally available last week. And so we're going to cover how you can get started using it, the unique value that it provides as well, and I'll show you how easy it is to get started. So a little bit about me to kick things off. So I'm based in the Bay Area in California. I've worked at in observability for the better part of the last decade. Most recently came from Lightstep, so joined Lightstep before acquisition, stayed on for a bit after the acquisition. They're a distributed tracing company, and the founders of Lightstep also founded OpenTelemetry. And I prior to that, I had a long stint at AppDynamics, where I also joined prior to the acquisition and stayed on past the acquisition, and worked on a number of things there, including the APM agents. So that would be all the fun languages like Node uh, um, and Go and Python and Ruby. And then moved on to the APM platform side of things. So working on the data model, the core UI. So I've had the chance to work with dozens of customers directly in a variety of architectures, helping them realize the value of APM and tracing data. So, what are we going to cover today? A few things. So I'm going to kick it off with just a brief overview of our Service Explorer use cases. So, what are the things that you can do with it? What problems does it solve for you? Then we're going to go into an in-product demo of the Service Explorer. So we're going to walk through it in some detail, and we'll show you how everything works and how you can realize those use cases, realize the value from the product. And then at the end, I'll spend a few minutes talking about basically what does data intake look like? What does it look like to get data into Observe and light up our Service Explorer and our Trace Explorer as well. And then we'll leave some time at the end for Q&A. So kicking things off with a brief overview of the Service Explorer. So just to kind of set the stage, we launched our Trace Explorer about 6 months ago now. And so this is trace search and a trace visualization. So we've got a flame chart to help you visualize sequencing and parallelism in a complex request flow. We offer 13 months of trace retention, which is kind of unheard of in the industry. It's all just because we're built on a data lake. It's very easy for us to do that. And in the Trace Explorer, you can also pivot to related metrics and logs to really help you with your troubleshooting. So and get to the root cause of issues. So we'll actually show that in the product a little bit as well. So with that, we last week we launched our Service Explorer, which this is kind of our our entrance in the APM market, and it has a number of capabilities, number of core capabilities that you would expect from an APM product. So that would be service discovery, basically figuring out, you send in your hotel data, and we determine automatically all the services, microservices and databases and external calls that you're making that are inside your data. We also do service dependency mapping, so just out of the box, figuring out which services talk to what, and showing that visually on a map. We have a deep service introspection, so you can understand where the latency hotspots are, where the errors are in your service. You can correlate service performance to infrastructure performance. We also have deployment tracking and deployment markers, so you can correlate a degradation in your service to a new deploy. So you can take a quick action and roll back your deploy. So we'll show all that stuff as well. And we're fully compatible with OTel auto instrumentation. We're actually completely OTel native. So there's no proprietary instrumentation or agents or anything like that that you need. You just send OTel data to our OTLP endpoint, and we can light all this stuff up. And then just like with a Trace Explorer, you can pivot from services to the logs, metrics, and traces related to that service, which just helps you drill down and get all of the data that you have available that you can use to get to the root cause and diagnose issues more fully. So that's the the overview of everything we're going to show you. Now let's go and dive in to the actual product here. So let me go ahead and switch tabs. We got some Zoom stuff in the way. So here we go. We'll start off here. So now we're in the product. We're in our demo environment here, where if you're familiar with the OpenTelemetry demo app, this is basically what we've got instrumented here. As I mentioned, the data source here is OTel spans. So we're basically looking at the spans of type server, which is just service entry points. And we're looking at the unique service names on those spans. And whenever we see a new service name, that's basically an item in this entry here. And all of these metrics are just derived from the spans. So we look at all the spans of type server in the ad service, and then we aggregate those up into metrics, and that's what you see here. We also are, as you can see, we also surface databases. So this Redis database is not actually instrumented with anything. There is no database, actual database instrumentation, but the other services make calls to this Redis database, and that's how we know that database exists. And this is another thing that you would expect coming from a more legacy APM product that has a proprietary agent, but we're actually very easily able to do that in OTel as well. So we can infer the existence of all sorts of other things that may not be directly instrumented, and we can service them here. And as we'll see later on, this is actually a first-class citizen, so you can click on it to inspect it, which we'll go ahead and do that later. And then you'll notice that our time window here is really just an hour, but any service here that reported data in the last, any service in your environment that reported data in the last 7 days is going to appear here. So even if it's a low throughput service that's not sending data, in every hour or every minute, you'll still be able to click in and inspect it, and we still keep track of it. We also have, as you can see here, there's an environment dropdown, and we're again just leveraging the OTel data. So if you put in a deployment.environment resource attribute into your spans, then we actually just read off of that, and we can split up all of the metrics based off of that environment. We can filter this whole view based on, you can look at the services across all environments, or you can look at just one particular environment. So another way that we're leveraging the OpenTelemetry conventions. So that's the service catalog. Now we'll go over to the service map. So this there's a couple of service maps in our Service Explorer, and this is the overall map. This is meant to give you a picture of the overall architecture, the overall communication flow of your whole system. So it's not necessarily a troubleshooting view. I'll show you what that looks like in a bit. This is meant to be if you're like a new engineer and you just want to understand the whole architecture and get ramped up quickly. Or if you're on call and you're getting pinged about a service that you're not very familiar with, you can kind of come here and just get the lay of the land and understand, what's talking to that service, what does that service talk to, where is it in your architecture. We also have the same red metrics that we show on the catalog. We just show them here as well. So you can just select the red metric of interest. And this is not meant to be a monitoring view. So like we've had customers who basically tell us, hey, this is great, but I want to put this up on, I have a knock. Or I just have, a big dashboard that I want to put a map up, and I want it to just tell me if there is any service that's unhealthy or deviating from a baseline. And so that's actually something that we're working on now. You'll be able to create anomaly monitors and associate the performance of a service with the performance of with the status of those monitors, and basically color the nodes here red, yellow, green, and get some really clear indicators in the overall service health. So you could use this as a monitoring view. Now, that's all out of the box is coming, but today what you can already do is there's this button here, and you'll see this a lot when you use our Service Explorer, where we basically open the pre-canned visualization or the pre-canned chart or whatever it might be in this really powerful tool called Worksheet. And from here, you can see that it's basically just using all these charts. Even this complex map is just a query that you can write yourself. And it's just pulling the data straight from our service metrics and our database metrics. And it's just building this map from the data that's available there. And so there's a lot of things that you can do to customize this. For example, like if you wanted to make a really simple health indicator where the node color is actually determined by the error rate, and if it's greater than some value, like let's say 10 or let's say 5%, it'll just turn that red, and you can make everything else green if you wanted to, for example. So you can customize this, and you can also add your own metrics as well, because this is just a query. It's just returning, if we go to the table here, it's just returning a bunch of data for each of your services. You can add your own values here. So if you have your own anomaly detection, you can already add that here. So there's a lot of ways that you can customize this out of the box, but we customize this from the out of the box, but we are going to make this easier to do out of the box as well. So when you go into this map, there's a bunch, and you click on a service, there's a bunch of jumping off points here. So you can inspect the service, which we're going to take the covers off of that in a second. But you can also go straight to logs, metrics, and traces for your service. So this is really helpful if you're in the middle of an incident and you've narrowed something down to a particular service and you just want to get to the telemetry associated with that service, rather than kind of inspect it further. You kind of just want to see, show me the actual raw data, and I can go and debug it from there. So we can open these, and each of these will just open in our Trace Explorer, Log Explorer, and Metrics Explorer. So now we're looking at traces for that particular service. We just click to view one, and we can see its flame graph. Yep, this one has an error on it. We can go look at logs as well. So these are the OTel logs that we're sending. And even from here, because these logs are associated with traces, we can go ahead and click here and even inspect the traces from there as well. And then we can also look at metrics. Now, we are, as part of the Service Explorer, we just provide a bunch of metrics out of the box for you from your span. So you'll always have some metrics for your service. Even if you don't set up custom metrics, we will provide some. And then from here, you can very easily go ahead and add these metrics to dashboards. So you can do, whatever you want with the data. So the last thing that I want to show, and this is kind of like the meat of the whole of this whole feature, is really inspecting a service. So let's pick a good one here. Let's pick the product catalog because that one has a lot of errors in it. So this should be an interesting one. So this is really our developer-focused view for a deep service inspection and a deep debugging. And so right off the bat, you can see red metrics for your service. You also have a histogram, so you can understand the distribution. One of the things we like to say at my last company was performance is a shape, not just a number. So we find that it's very helpful for, or users find it very valuable to see not just, the P95 or the P50 or whatever might be latency, but actually what's the shape of the latency distribution over time. So we just expose that directly here. Now, one of the things that that users have told us is sometimes they don't want to look at all these charts and they just want to go straight to slow or error traces. So we have a workflow for that where you click here to go look at traces for this service. And it's already filtered to the slowest traces. We're basically just running a P95 query and we're figuring out what's, roughly the 5% slowest traces. So we're showing you that right off the bat here. And again, you just click view trace and you can kind of see, you can go straight to those particular traces. I'm just going to close a few tabs here. And you can also look at error traces as well. Or you can look at slow and error traces if you wanted to. So you can get to just the hotspots that are of interest to you. We also have in here a breakdown by endpoint. So you can basically what we're doing here is we're looking at the unique we're looking at the service entry spans again. That's the spans of type server, and we're looking at the unique span names on those, and those are often the endpoint names. So as you can see here, this service has get product and list products as its endpoints, and it's often the case that when you're troubleshooting a service, there's one particular endpoint that you narrow down. You can kind of see what's the list of endpoints, which one is the slowest, and then you may want to just inspect that endpoint. So we have this filter here where now the entire view is filtered to just the metrics and just the data for that endpoint. So now you can go really deep. So when you go pivot over to the traces, it's just going to show you traces for that endpoint. I'm going to go back to the overall service view. The next thing that I want to show is our deployment tracking, which I mentioned is a really key feature. So I don't think this particular service has deployments, but we can go and open this up in a different environment. We can go look at this service here, which we deploy to quite often. So let's open up to say like past 24 hours or so. So now you can see a bunch of deploys on here. And what we're basically doing is we're driving this off of your service.version attribute in your OTel spans. So this is all done automatically, provided you're sending that attribute in, which a lot of our customers already do. And it's really easy to add that, like as an environment variable, for example, or like you could add it in your CI/CD pipeline. So every span has the version of the service. Usually a git SHA is the common thing that people use. So then what we'll do is we'll actually we'll eventify the deployments. So the first time that we see a new value of service.version for your service, we will eventify it. We will put a timestamp on it, and that allows us to draw a marker. And that's what these markers are. So you can see here, you just hover over it, and it shows you when that deploy happened and what the version is. So a common usage of this is if you start to see on your errors chart or your duration chart, if you start to see a spike in latency, and you see that spike in latency or errors it happened after a new deploy with that marker, then you have a strong signal that maybe it's that deploy that is causing this regression, and you can take an instant action to just roll back that deploy and get the service back to health. and it buys you some more time to kind of go to the root cause, look at the traces for that new deploy and see what happened. One of the things that we've heard from customers that they really like about the way that we are doing this is that because we're using the data on the span, we can metricize the performance of different. We can metricize your service performance based on the version. So that's what this chart basically is here, is your performance grouped by version. Now you can kind of see here that this service doesn't really have, doesn't have multiple versions running at the same time. You can kind of see these almost hard cutovers from one version to the next. But if you are doing canaries and you have multiple versions running in production at the same time, you can use these charts, which are all split up by version, to monitor those canary deployments and check to see proactively, is one of those canaries actually, perform, does it have a regression or anything like that? So that's our deployment markers and deployment tracking. In the excuse me. In the service inspector, we also surface errors and exceptions. So these errors are basically just coming from the span, and the exceptions are coming from span events. So this one doesn't have it, but I'm fairly certain that the front end is going to have some exceptions. So yeah, here we go. So we're doing some grouping here to basically, we want to kind of dedupe exceptions. So if you have, one of the things we hear from customers is, hey, I'm getting, I have a bunch of exceptions, and the only thing that they're different by is a unique ID, for example, or a customer ID. Well, we actually are using our logs patterns feature to go and group those exceptions. And we do have some improvements to that coming soon as well. We're going to do some more sophisticated grouping. But what this allows you to do is very quickly look at the top exceptions generated. So this service has 4,000, almost 5,000 exceptions in this 1 hour period for this particular error. And you can just expand to see what the stack trace is for this particular exception. And if you wanted to look at this exception in context, we can send you to, you click that View Exceptions button and you come to our Log Explorer. And now you see all of the exceptions for that particular, of that particular type, all of the actual instances of that exception. And from here, you can go in and inspect the trace. And so you can see that exception with greater context. And basically get right to the root cause and fix that exception in your service. We also have a dependency map that's scoped to a particular service. So this is a really key feature when you're trying to understand the blast radius of some issue that's happening in your service. You can see what's actually calling it. So now the front end, it's the front end service, so there isn't really anything calling it. This is just kind of our load generator infrastructure here. But you can also see what are your downstream services. So what might be impacting you and the health of your service. So we can see that the front end depends on the checkout service, and we can actually just click here and go and inspect that service. If we think that that service is the one that may be causing our issues, we can see that, for example, it has an even higher percentage of errors. We also have Kubernetes infrastructure. So this is a very common workflow that customers who are on Kubernetes have. Now, this environment doesn't have it, but we can go into one that does over here. So we're just looking at the Kubernetes tags that are on your service, and we're pulling out the pod, the cluster, and the namespace. And we're actually able to group we just metricize again the service performance based on the pod. So what you can do here is you can understand, do I have an issue with one pod? In which case, that's not really an issue with my service. That's really clearly an issue with Kubernetes. Or do I have a systemic issue? Are all the pods bad? In which case, maybe I want to check the cluster, or it's definitely an issue with my service. We're working on a Kubernetes Explorer. So if you do find that an issue may be with one particular pod, or if the whole cluster is impacted, you can actually, you'll soon be able to just click one of these pods and go straight into the Kubernetes Explorer to see that in greater detail. So let's go back to the catalog. And I mentioned that the database that we discover is actually a first-class citizen in the product. So let's go ahead and click here and take the covers off this. So all of this data is coming from the spans that called that database. There's nothing on this database itself, but we're able to show you the top operations that you're using in this database. We're able to show you the database statements as well, the top statements, and you can go and look at traces just for the slowest statements or the statements that are causing errors. And then we also show you a dependency map that gives you a view into what are the dependencies on this database. So you can see clearly the cart service is the one that calls this database, and the front end and the checkout service call the cart service. So now you can clearly understand, if you are inspecting this database, what is the blast radius, or what is impacted by this database if it ends up causing some issue. So that is our Service Explorer. There's even more functionality and capabilities there, but those are the key ones that I wanted to show you today. And the last thing I'm gonna very quickly do, and just to give you a sense of how you can get started with this, is show you, what does the pathway look to get data into this system. So we're going to jump out of Chrome for a second, and we're going to let me go and share my whole desktop here. So now we're going to jump into VS Code for a second. So I've got a really simple app that just comes from the OTel docs. It just rolls the dice. It's a Node app. And I've instrumented it with zero code libraries. And that's really just, we have docs on this on our site. It's really just copy paste a couple of commands and set a couple environment variables. And now your service is instrumented with OTel. And here are those commands, or here are the environment variables that you set. You just set your service name. And then we go and get the observe agent, and here we have it running in a Docker container. And again, these instructions are just on the website. You just run simple commands to go and get the agent. And now your instrumentation is talking to the agent, and the agent is sending data into observe. So once you set all of that up, which just takes a few minutes, now we can go into, we'll generate some load on this service. And now we'll go into our demo environment here, where I have that OTel Dice Roller app. And you can see that all of the data that we were seeing in our demo environment is here. This is just the data that we sent in. One of the cool things that we've made it really easy to do is because I mentioned that for environment and version, we are just using the span tags, is if we go back into the definition here, into the attributes, we're setting an environment is equal to dev and a service version equal to this, just like fake looking, git SHA, right? And so then we can come in here and you can see the environment is dev. So it just picked that up. And we can go to deployments, and we can see that there was this new deployment, that F47, which matches what we have here. And that's how easy it is to basically set environment and version for your service. So that is a really quick tour of how to get started with the Service Explorer, and our overview of what our Service Explorer does. So we're really excited to get it into customers' hands. And